Welcome to STEM Careers with Newton's Road for 6th to 12th grade students. Each week, we will be joined by experts from our regional organizations to help you explore STEM-related careers. My name is Barb Tremont. I'm the Executive Director of Newton's Road, and we are a regional nonprofit supporting STEM learning and career exploration. I also have with me today our Michigan Tech University intern, Annalisa Wiesner.
Hi, everyone.
And our special guest today is Emily Burke, and she's here today to talk with us about becoming a naturalist. So Emily is with the Grass River Natural Area, and as you can see, she studied in college anthrobiology, and she has a master's degree in environmental education. And as you might expect, she loves being outside. That's what we mean by field. And it'd be interesting to learn what she did on the Pacific Crest Trail, which goes all the way from Mexico to Canada. But first, I'm going to remind you that if you would like to have questions for Emily or Newton's Road team, we will be looking in the Facebook Live comments area for this episode so that we can get those answered. And this it will be recorded for later availability. You'll find it on our Facebook Live page, or you can also look on the YouTube channels. Next, we're going to share a little bit about Newton's Road. We're very excited that 2020 marks our 10-year anniversary of working to ensure that all kids in our region have access to quality STEM learning and career exploration. And our region is the 5-county area. So we're starting out here on our website and our homepage. And if you wanted to come back to see future programs, you just click into this box and it'll take you right over there. But we're going to start just clicking on the homepage and encourage you to join our mailing list. And you will receive a monthly newsletter that tells you about upcoming events, whether they're virtual mostly right now, but in the future when we're in person again, you'll find them also on this calendar. And we also have anytime activities. So that would be great news to understand about what's going on. We also have the STEM at Home page that shows the past recordings here, if you would like to hook from here rather than from Facebook, and you can see those episodes right there in front of you. The career investigation page was also a great resource since you are obviously somebody interested in looking at that. And these resources, many of them are specific for our region, but other ones are specific to a unique career. So it's a great place. It's probably the only place in our region where you can find all of these resources in one place. So again, if you have any questions for us, please use that comments feature in Facebook. And right now we're going to get back to Emily and learn about her journey to becoming a naturalist and what a naturalist does. Hi, Emily. Back to you.
Hello. Hello, everyone. It's so great to be here. I'm very excited to be here with Newton's Road and to talk to you about what it is to be a naturalist. All right. So, what is a naturalist? Because it's not a term you hear often. So basically, in the broadest definition of it is just someone who is knowledgeable about natural history. You might be thinking, well, what is natural history? And natural history is just a fancy term that means the study of nature. So everything from rocks to birds to mushrooms to the soil, algae, anything that has to do with nature. And so I always find it easiest to explain to people what a naturalist is by talking about some naturalists that you might know of. So some famous naturalists are John Muir, who is the guy who explored the Sierras, the Sierra Nevada mountains in California, and he started the Sierra Club. John James Audubon, who you might know the name Audubon and its association with birds. Henry David Thoreau was the man who lived in a cabin in Walden Pond, by Walden Pond in Massachusetts, and wrote Walden Pond. Charles Darwin, you might have heard of. He is the man who first popularized the idea of evolution and how species evolve from from each other. And then Rachel Carson is another one. She is a marine biologist who was really the first person that started talking about the effect of DDT on the bald eagle population. If you've heard of that, that was a big topic back in the 1970s. And then some more current naturalists that you might have heard of include Steve Irwin, the crocodile hunter, Jane Goodall, who of course studied chimpanzees, studies them still, and then David Attenborough, who's pictured in the bottom right there. He is the guy, you know, the British guy with the great accent that does all of the Planet Earth episodes. So go ahead, Annalisa. Okay, so now that we know kind of who some famous naturalists are, let's talk about what they do. So we said that a naturalist is someone who's knowledgeable about nature. So basically a naturalist, it's a really broad field. It's a really broad career. It encompasses anybody that studies and teaches other people about nature. So some, you can kind of break it up into two different sort of like sub careers or subfields, I guess. The first one is collecting data and sort of being like a scientist about the natural world and about nature. And then the second part of being a naturalist is communicating those findings to people. So whether that's through writing articles or, you know, being like David Attenborough and doing TV shows, or teaching people about it, you know, like maybe at a nature center or a museum or a zoo sort of a thing. So we'll talk more about some general tasks on the next slide. Go ahead. Yeah, okay, so what do I actually do on a daily basis? These 3 bullet points, the first one kind of covers where I'm teaching people like in person. So that could be leading field trips. So I'll take a group of kids, you know, outside and we'll go on a hike and we'll talk about the birds or the plants that live there. I also lead summer camps outside, so like nature related summer camps. A naturalist also teaches a lot of public programs. So that might be, you know, people come to the nature center where I work, Grass River Natural Area, for a public program on owls. We lead these things called owl prowls, where we take groups of people out on our trails at night and we call for owls, and the owls, you know, usually respond to those calls and fly in, and we get to see owls up close and we talk about them. And then, you know, I also teach some college classes at NMC and through NMC's extended education, which is basically just classes for adults that are interested in learning more about nature. So then the second bullet point is kind of ways that a naturalist teaches people about nature when they're not face to face with that person. So that could be writing articles about nature. I do that for our newsletters that go out to our members, the email newsletters. I also film videos that go on Grass River's Facebook page and YouTube channel, and just about like different nature topics. I also take a lot of photos and post them on social media pages like Facebook and Instagram. So just different ways to teach people about nature when you're not face to face with those people. And then the last bullet point, monitoring the health of the water and land, is kind of that piece about studying and collecting data on nature that's more of like being a scientist. So some of the things that a naturalist might do, that I do that's related to that, are we go out and monitor the health of our streams. So like collecting little water samples and testing them for like the different nutrients or the different tiny little animals that live in the stream water. You know, a naturalist might put up camera traps, which are motion censored cameras that you can put like along trails, and anytime anything that's moving goes by, it trips the camera off and it takes a photo of it. And so we can study animal populations that way and see what sort of critters are prowling around out there in the woods. Yeah, so those are some of the things that a naturalist might do on a daily basis. So if a lot of these things that a naturalist does are sounding a lot like other careers to you, like a wildlife biologist or like an environmental scientist, you are right. There's a ton of crossover between being a naturalist and being, you know, somebody who studies wildlife biology or botany, which is just the study of plants. Geology is the study of rocks and soil. And then a field researcher you can see on that list is, like Barb said, just somebody who is out in nature, outside, collecting data on, you know, whether it's like the type of plants that live there or even anything from like the type of weather that happens on a daily basis. And definitely park rangers are very similar to what a naturalist does. You know, like if you've ever been to a national park, park rangers a lot of times greet you and tell you about the area, what animals you might see, and they lead a lot of like campfire programs where people come and listen to, like I was in the Grand Canyon a couple of years ago and I listened to a park ranger do a talk on condors, which are kind of like a type of vulture, but they're endangered, so that was cool. And then like an environmental educator is sort of another term for a naturalist, and teachers also kind of overlap with naturalists if the teacher teaches at, especially if the teacher teaches at sort of a non-traditional school that's very environmentally focused. So I would say that if you asked the average wildlife biologist or the average environmental scientist or the average park ranger, they would say, yes, I am both a wildlife biologist and a naturalist. A naturalist is sort of a catch-all term for anybody that studies or teaches people about nature. So if we go to the next slide, where do naturalists work? So like I said, it's a very broad career. There's lots of things you can do with it. And in that sense, there's lots of different places you can work. So parks, that means anything from like a local city park to a state park to a national park, like Yosemite or Yellowstone or Sleeping Bear Dunes National Lakeshore. Naturalists definitely work at nature centers, museums, if it's science and, you know, like Museum of Natural History, that sort of museum, if it's science and nature based. Naturalists work at zoos for sure to tell people about the animals, and aquariums. And then governmental agencies, that just means anything that, like every county, so like Grand Traverse County we're in right now, you might be somewhere in Leelanau or Benzie or anywhere in the 5-county area, but any of those counties have what's called a conservation district that basically is charged with conserving the land and the water of that county. And they employ naturalists there, but also governmental agencies can mean much bigger things like state government, like you might work for the Michigan Department of Natural Resources. They employ state biologists that study animal populations, plant populations, that sort of thing. And then that also includes federal government, so like the whole United States government, with things like the Fish and Wildlife Service. They employ naturalists as people to go out and study whatever nature topics they're interested in. And then a lot of environmental nonprofits, for sure. Universities, some universities employ naturalists either to teach college students, which you would have to have an advanced degree, a master's to do community college teaching, but then a PhD to do most other sorts of college teaching. And then non-traditional schools. So I guess a local example would be like Greenspire, if you've heard of Greenspire School, that's based at the Grand Traverse Commons. That's sort of an environmentally focused school. And I know a naturalist that teaches the environmental science classes there. So you can work at a lot of different places as a naturalist. So where I work, I mentioned this earlier, is Grass River Natural Area. So it's a really big natural area. We have almost 1,500 acres, 7 miles of trail. So it's basically just like a big wilderness place. It's out near Bel Air, so kind of near the Torch Lake area, if you're familiar with that area. And so in addition to, you know, having this giant outdoor space, we also have a nature center where we do a lot of programs. Like people can come learn about, you know, the wildflowers. We do guided walks, or, you know, we do like guided bird walks, and we do a lot of summer camps and field trips for schools, that sort of thing. And we're a small nonprofit, which I don't know if anybody on previous recordings of this Newton's Road series has talked to you guys about what a nonprofit is, but just super briefly. And by the way, Newton's Road is also a nonprofit, I learned. But just super briefly, a nonprofit is just an organization that is really focused on its mission, as opposed to being really focused on its profit. So instead of being super focused on making money, which of course nonprofits, you know, need to make money too in order to pay their staff and that sort of thing. But instead of being singularly focused on making money, nonprofits are usually driven by either an environmental or a social or an educational cause. So like Grass River's mission, for example, is to conserve the Grass River, to manage the Grass River Natural Area, conserve and protect the watershed, which just means like the area around it, and then also to provide opportunities that increase knowledge, appreciation, and stewardship of the natural world. So that's a long mission, but that's briefly what it means to be a nonprofit. And I'm sure you guys might have a lot of questions about that because it is kind of a confusing topic. But so this is where I work now, but in the past I've worked at like the Duke Lemur Center, which is kind of like a zoo, but more like a research center where they research lemurs. I've worked in governmental agencies. There's an agency called the Bureau of Land Management out west, where I led programs, guided walks for them, for fourth graders. I've worked at non-traditional schools in the area. So basically you can do a lot of crossover in these different places where you can work as a naturalist. You know, you don't have to just pick like, I'm gonna work at governmental agencies. You can do a lot of crossing over. All right, so why go into this field? So this is kind of the big crux of the issue, right? So I'm just gonna say most people do not go into the environmental field, anything related to environmentalism or sustainability, for the money, because it's not the biggest money maker. Most jobs are. I mean, some jobs you can, in the naturalist field, you can make really good money. But on the whole, it's not the biggest money making field. But most people go into the environmentalist or the naturalist field because they feel really strongly about conserving nature. So I think we can probably all agree that some of the major problems that are facing our world today are climate change, mass extinction, which just means that a lot of species, a lot of types of animals and plants and fungi are going extinct at much higher rates than usual. Habitat loss, because, you know, there's more and more humans and we take up space, and that's okay, but that means that, you know, then there's the animals that and the plants that are really dependent on like big areas of forest to be undisturbed and that sort of thing, you know, they have a really hard time with that. And those first three might seem all very connected, but then the fourth one, I think, you know, a big problem in the world today is mental illness, and people have like large rate or higher rates of depression and anxiety and that sort of thing. And so if we go to the next slide, kind of explain the connection there. So I think the question of why people go into the field of being a naturalist can kind of be answered by these two quotes. So in the end, we will conserve only what we love will love only what we understand, and we will understand only what we are taught. So here in Northern Michigan, we have great access to nature, but in places like Detroit or Chicago or larger cities, people might not, and so they might never learn about nature. And if you don't know anything about something, you're not going to fall in love with it, and you're not going to want to protect it. And then the second quote: the more high tech our lives become, the more nature we need. Of course, technology is a huge benefit to our society. And even in the naturalist field, we use technology daily, all the time. And it really helps us research and learn about nature, but also teach people about nature, like this webinar. We wouldn't be able to do that without technology. But there also needs to be a balance, because people, for hundreds and thousands of years lived in really close connection with the natural world. They lived outside pretty much all the time. And that's kind of like how our brains are wired to be in nature all the time. So, I mean, it's the phrase, like, a breath of fresh air says it all, that like going outside is just a breath of fresh air. It makes us relax. It makes us feel more calm. And there's a lot of research that supports that too. So there's also a lot of there's a lot of research that supports that spending time in nature can definitely not cure at all, but it can help some types of mental illness. So basically, protecting nature is obviously good for nature, but it's also good for us, because we need that space to be conserved in order to have a place to recharge. So basically, I think naturalists save the world. So, okay, how do you know if you would like this sort of career? So the first thing is that you have to love nature and being outside, because you're going to be talking about nature all the time, and you're going to be outside a lot of the time. If you're passionate about sustainability or environmentalism, this might be a good career for you. If you're adventurous, maybe you like to travel, because a lot of times this career will take you places that some people might feel like, I don't want to go climb that mountain, I don't want to go kayak down that river. But if you're adventurous, you might really thrive in this sort of field. This is a great career if you're really interested in science and you totally like nerd out about field guides, or like, if you love watching Planet Earth. But maybe you don't necessarily want to be in an office all the time, or in a lab, or stuck behind a desk. And then it does help in this field to both love science, but to also be a people person. So if you, really like numbers and stats and that sort of thing, but you also really like talking to people and teaching people about stuff, this might be a great field for you, because you kind of need both of those skills. So here are some of the things you'll need to know about if you want to get hired to be a naturalist. I'll say, before we go down this list, if you go to school to become a naturalist, or any of the sort of careers that are related to it, you will learn all of this stuff in school. So the only requirement right now really is at the bottom in caps to love nature and be outside. But in order to be hired as a naturalist after school, these are some of the things that you would need to know about. You would need to know how to identify plants and animals and mushrooms and rock types in your area, to understand environmental processes, which I just mean big things like photosynthesis, how that works, and like the water cycle, how that works. Field research skills, so how to use like a GPS and take data points, and follow like a very clear data collecting protocol. And then you would need to be able to not just know about these things, but how to talk about these things in a way that's interesting and not boring, because people don't want to listen to you, and they won't learn as much if you're not, talking about it in an interesting, exciting way. So public speaking skills, being able to develop a lesson plan like teachers do. So those sort of like education and teaching skills are really important too. And then the last thing is the ability to what I call rough it. Because a lot of times, especially if you're doing field work, which just means, being outside, it might be really hot like it is today. It might be really cold. There might be a ton of mosquitoes. You might have to backpack to the site where you have to collect this data or film this video, and you might have to sleep in a tent for a night or two. So that desire and willingness to be a little bit uncomfortable, or to be the ability to be comfortable while being uncomfortable, is really important. So if we go to the next slide, so I think this is the last thing I'm going to talk about before we have time for questions. But if you love nature, how to become a naturalist or any of the sort of careers that are related to being a naturalist that we talked about earlier, you're going to need a bachelor's degree. And, there's not one degree like in natural history. So there's a lot of different degrees you can get. Anything related to biology, environmental science, natural resources. And then some colleges do offer bachelor's degrees in environmental education, which is basically just learning how to teach people about nature. And then you're also going to want some field experience. A lot of times in the field of being a naturalist, you won't be hired right after you get your college degree, but you won't be hired for a full-time position, I should say. But you'll have to do like an internship or a seasonal position where you're hired for like 3 months for the summer, sort of get some experience, and then you're usually hired full-time. Right. So, this is the last thing I was going to talk about. So if you are interested in the sort of naturalist environmentalism field, I just put together a quick list of some organizations in the area that you can check out in Northern Michigan. And some of them are nature centers, like the Boardman Nature Center, Sleeping Bear Dunes National Lakeshore, and then, some other nonprofits and that sort of thing. So I think it's time for questions. If anybody has any.
I saw a question about forest bathing. It's a term that's come up more recently.
Yeah.
Do you do that in your job?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And I guess we should explain what forest bathing is for those people that don't know. Forest bathing it's an ancient Japanese art form, actually. And basically all it means is walking through the forest or anywhere in nature, just very slowly and just stopping to notice, like how the sunlight looks coming in through the leaves, or how the flowers smell, and just really slowing down and observing everything while you're walking through nature. And we at Grass River, we don't currently offer any forest bathing classes, but that is definitely something I have looked into to get certified in, for sure, because it definitely relates to being in nature and helping people connect with nature.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you for answering that, Emily. And thank you for opening our eyes and ears and everything into what a naturalist does. And thanks to all of you for joining STEM at Home Live with Newton's Road. We also want to note that we could not bring you this programming without the support of sponsors, partners, and other supporters. So thank you to all of them. And we'd also hope to see you again next Thursday when the career we're exploring is physical therapy. Same time next week. See you then.